Edwin Arlington Robinson. He was born at Head Tide, Maine on December 22nd, 1869. His father was 50 and had just retired at Robinson's birth. Shortly after, the family moved 12 miles down the Kennebec to Gardner, which would become the Tilbury Town of Robinson's poems. After graduating from high school, he spent 4 difficult years in apparent idleness. He didn't have a job or go to college, but he did read extensively and work on his poetry. At the age of 22, however, he finally did enter Harvard University, and he remained there for 2 years. He was a special student of philosophy, literature, and language. And special student means that he didn't formally have a major. He just sort of picked the classes that he wanted to go to, and he would attend those. After the death of his father in 1893, Robinson went into a deep depression. Also, he had a chronic abscess of his ear, which kept him in pain. Also, it made him dizzy and disoriented, and at one point he thought that he would lose his mind from this illness. Shortly after he began to suffer from the abscess of his ear, he would lose both of his brothers, and then his mother would fall into bad health. In 1896, his mother passed away, and after she passed away, Robinson moved to New York. There, he self-published The Torrent and The Night Before because he couldn't find a publisher. And after a year in New York writing and struggling, he was offered a job at Harvard University as the office secretary for the president. This job was not a good match for Robinson's abilities. It did not go well. However, while he lived there, he did meet a lot of notable and artistic friends in Greenwich Village. Sadly, Robinson died on April 6, 1935, of cancer in a New York hospital. His poetries, the poems that we are going to cover, they're in traditional form with metrically regular verse, rhymes, and Robinson was a fan of elevated diction. This technique dignifies the subject matter, and it also provides a contrast because the subjects, the individuals that he is speaking about, tend to be quite unpoetic. According to traditional standards. So it's that contrast that makes these individuals interesting. These characters that we are going to read about today are located in the town of Tilbury. This is an imaginary town that Robinson created, and it is based on his hometown of Gardner, Maine. The first poem is Richard Cory. Richard Cory comes to tragedy through a spiritual blindness with regards to himself and others. It's a great example of the old adage, money does not necessarily buy one happiness. So when you read Richard Cory, it's a very tragic poem. Next, you're going to read Miniver Cheevy. And Miniver Cheevy is an archetype of the frustrated romantic idealist. So Miniver has all these wonderful ideas. He dreams of living in a different time when things were more romantic. However, Miniver is very ironic because he's very unheroic and rather lazy, and so he doesn't exhibit the typical archetype of a romantic. So it's funny. I hope you enjoy it. And then next we have Mr. Flood's Party. And this poem's theme is loneliness. The tone tends to be half humorous. There are parts of it that are funny, but then it's also incredibly tragic. But Robinson has a way of delicately balancing these two things, and to the point where the poem doesn't become too overly sentimental, or does it treat our subject too harshly. Mr. Flood's party dramatizes the pathos of lonely old age. This sad experience that some people have when they outlive their friends, when they go home to an empty house. So I hope you enjoy these 3 poems. I do. And the last one is going to be Luke Havergal. This poem has an individual who is hearing a voice from beyond. So I rather enjoy this one as well.